Today we continue our exploration of Weekly Shonen Jump, looking at the years 1976 and 1977. I don't have much additional things to say at the beginning of this video, other than that Jump is coasting along and growing at this time. It had a plethora of popular series in different genres, but in these last 2 years it would see one of its very first monumental titles. So without further delay, let's get into the first series of 1976. Debuting in issue 2 of 1976, Blue City by Yukinobu Hoshino was a sci-fi manga that lasted 18 chapters and 2 volumes. Hoshino mostly wrote sci-fi manga from what I can tell, and has a large body of work, Blue City being a sci-fi story as well, about an underwater city where scientists are trying to find a solution to overpopulation and dwindling Earth resources. Other events that occur throughout the story include meteorites hitting the Earth with a dangerous pathogen, which eventually get nuked, causing all life on Earth to be destroyed. A gigantic sea devil would also appear, as well as zombie-like creatures. There also seems to be some intrigue, backstabbing and sabotage in the underwater city, and a character named Dr. Genocide also existed, with it also mentioning a race of aquatic humans. So there was a lot going on in Blue City from what I can tell. It honestly sounds really interesting, and even got a couple of one-shots either before or after it serialized from my understanding, which are called Sea Fang and the Battle of Blue. The following week, we would see the debut of gag manga Onsen Boy, which lasted only 16 chapters, but after that, in issue 4 of 1976,
and if you can believe it,
another baseball series, this time called Akutare Giants, running for a total of 204 chapters in 22 volumes. It would be created by Yoshihiro Takahashi, the creator of Ginga, a manga I can't wait to cover, but we'll have to wait until the 80s. At the same time, while he was serializing Akutare Giants in Shonen Jump, he was also serializing White Fighter Yamato, a similar manga to Ginga about dogs, which on its own would reach a staggering 26 volumes, cementing Yoshihiro Takahashi as a powerhouse mangaka in his eyes for doing 2 manga at once, something we still rarely see today. Back to Akutare Giants, it was your usual baseball affair from what I can tell, and didn't do very well at the beginning. However, its popularity rose when the rival of the series, Makoto Hiramatsu, joined forces with the protagonist Akira Murase. This decision is apparently attributed to advice Takahashi received from none other than Masumi Kurumada, the author of Saint Seiya, and another very important manga we'll be covering later on in this video. I'm not sure exactly how they would become friends or co-workers, but both did work on Otoko, Ippiki, Gaki, Daisho together as assistants. Jump has always been quite tight-knit with the friendships that develop between authors, particularly when they're assistants together. This is just one of the first examples of the younger generation graduating from being assistants in Jump into fully fledged authors. It's really sweet and nice to see that at its core, Jump is home to some very friendly people, and it's always been this way. Satellite no Niji, or Rainbow Satellite, by Jiro Gyu and Tadashi Kato lasted 3 volumes and 27 chapters. It looks to be a musical-based manga tackling the music industry during the 1970s, and follows a girl called Lisa who plays guitar and sings, who would then get scouted by a man called Tachibana, a record company director who just quit his job and is probably looking for some new talent to start afresh. Likely it sees Lisa and Tachibana together tackling the music world and seeing her becoming a star, a formula which we would see in Jump from time to time, one of the more recent and unfortunate examples being Act Age. In issue 12 of 1976, we would see the one-shot Big Gun, which I wanted to mention because it sounds really goofy and because Jump would give covers to one-shots back-to-back for 8 issues at this time. 9 if you include Super Tanuki Man in issue 10. Another one-shot of note is Gorilla no Taisho in issue 18, just because there's a real gorilla on the cover. It really stands out. Usually Jump will publish lots of one-shots, but to give so many a cover back-to-back is really interesting to me. I'm not sure something like this would ever happen today or throughout most of Jump's history. Perhaps they really wanted to showcase some new talent or hunt for new series or authors. In the issue following all these one-shots, we would see Ankoku Shinwa or Dark Myth, created by Daijiro Morihoshi, the same creator as Yokai Hunter, which we covered in our last video. This manga is fully readable alongside the one-shot it was packaged with, making it 6 chapters, one-shot in one volume. It honestly wasn't very good though. It contains a lot of Shinto, Buddhist and other religious myths, and exposits a lot about them throughout the story, ruining the pacing and readability for me. Perhaps if you had more knowledge on these topics or found them enjoyable, you'd have a better time, but for me it felt more like a boring history lecture. Mostly the horror manifests itself in a cosmic way, like something H.P. Lovecraft would write. The story follows a boy who discovers he's some sort of reincarnated savior, coming face to face with strange creatures and events as the plot moves forward, but it's told rather messily and uninterestingly, despite it possibly sounding like a Shin Megami Tensei game or something similar. It had a 1992 part OVA anime adaptation, and I'm not sure why 14 years after its release it got this, but Daijiro Morihoshi in general is cited as a big influence to many mangaka and artists in Japan. In Western anime communities, this OVA is considered to be one of the worst anime made in some cases, although some seem to like it and cite it having a Lovecraftian feel as the reason why. It also got a Famicom game in 1989, which looks to be a dungeon exploration game with boss fights where you fight all manner of creatures from the manga. Still, it came out 13 years after the manga's initial release, and I really want to ask why. What's more is the OVA got an English dub, produced in 1996 and released on DVD in 2003. I found it on YouTube, so it's not hard to find if you do want to watch it, and I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of these weird release dates, but I can't help but find its lasting popularity oddly intriguing. Issue 26 would see us with the short-lived Western series Sheriff Joe that would only last 12 chapters, followed by another manga called Neppu no Tora by Motoko Murakami in the next issue, lasting 33 chapters and 5 volumes. It was a motorcycle manga, racing still being big at the time, as I mentioned in the previous video where we looked at Circuit no Okami, which would still be growing strong at this time. Neppu no Tora wouldn't last long though, despite racing being popular at this time period, and with how short Sheriff Joe was, maybe Jump wanted something fresher and something that hadn't been done before, as racing and cowboys had already been big hits in the magazine. Todai Ichokusen, Tokyo University Straight Over the Line, was a gag manga focusing on education and studying, with its main character Toru Todai wanting to become a student of the prestigious Tokyo U University. It lasted 13 volumes and 168 chapters, with its author Yoshinori Kobayashi being known for his controversial politics and his manga tackling them called Obochama-kun, supposedly satirizing the bubble economy of Japan's time and having various conservative takes which people didn't like. Going back a few issues to issue 24, we would see the end of Jump's currently longest running manga at the time, The Gutsy Frog, at 294 chapters. Not only that, but The White Fang of Zero, as well as long-running baseball manga Astro Kyudan, would also end in subsequent issues, leaving Jump with some rather large boots to fill. Yasumi Yoshizawa, the creator of the Gutsy Frog, would accept the call to action, serializing a new manga just over a month after the end of his titanic frog-shaped series, this time with Piranme Homes, a mystery gag manga. Sadly, it only lasted 15 chapters, and from this point onwards, Yoshizawa would never make a manga as big as the Gutsy Frog, leaving Jump in a position to look for new talent, but for the next several months we wouldn't really see any big successes. Manga after manga would struggle to reach the 20 chapter mark, with series like Kondo no Tsubasa and Yonshomi no Kaijin-kun. This all changed though in issue 42 of 1976, but we would see not only one of the longest, most fruitful Shonen Jump manga, but one of the longest manga period in Kochira Katsushika ku Kaimeri Koen Mai Hashutsujo, or as most people call it, Kochikame. Created by Osamu Akimoto and having 201 volumes with 1,960-ish chapters. I say ish since it has so many spin-offs or one-shot bonus chapters it's hard to count, just know it's a lot. The story follows Ryotsu, a beat cop working in Katsushika Ward, who would mostly focus on making money or trying to make himself become a great person by boosting his ego. It was a gag manga that evolved over the years, including many references to current events, making it a very interesting series as it retained 40 years worth of real Japanese history throughout its serialization. People would have grown up and grown old while reading Kochikame, perhaps even passing away before it ended, which is sad, but it's not like One Piece where everyone wants to see the end, but more like a companion, a manga you can read every week and laugh at whatever wacky thing is happening to Ryotsu and the gang, perhaps not too dissimilar to our modern day Me and Roboco. It ended up having an anime, a sequel manga series in Ultra Jump, and numerous appearances and references in other works. It's a monumental piece of media that's hard to grasp how popular it is, at least to me in the West, though some have compared it to something like The Simpsons as an equivalent. Kochikame, as I'm aware, is quite beloved to Jump, being its longest series probably forever. It even had a few Kochikame-centric issues, which I assume is just Kochikame content. You can read some chapters, but it's a bit of a shame you can't read them all, although I think that's for fairly obvious reasons, as I'm not sure someone would want to translate almost 2,000 chapters of Kochikame. Although I have encountered a fair few people who are very passionate about the series outside of Japan, I think Spain has at least some of the manga translated and a box set you can buy, as well as having a Spanish dub of the anime. I've read roughly 38 chapters of Kochikame of varying quality in their translations. There's definitely a few great chapters translated though, particularly an arc where Ryotsu gets transferred to a smaller police post out in the middle of nowhere. I think the manga is extremely charming, funny, and a good time, and I can see why it lasted so long. We would then end 1976 with not one but two Kochikame covers, cementing itself very quickly as an important part of Jump, which it would go on to do for 40 years, ending serialization in issue 42 of 2016, just when I was getting into Jump, really. It rarely missed a single issue too, which I think is really impressive. Overall, I think 1976 was a successful year for Jump. Kochikame obviously contributing a lot retrospectively, as it would become an absolute giant, but we would see yet another very important manga in the following year too. 1977 starts with the mini-series called UFO Kari or UFO Hunting by Kosuke Mitsuki. It was compiled into one volume but attributed to other authors, so likely it was bundled in with some other sci-fi one-shots. But aliens are always a cool addition in my book. In the following issue though, we would see a very substantial series join Jump's ranks in Masumi Kurumada's Ring ni Kakero, or in English, Put It All in the Ring. Often it's attributed to be the magazine's first mega hit, helping it reach even greater popularity. Even though Kochikame would stand the ultimate test of time, Ring ni Kakero would bring in greater popularity as it progressed throughout its run, helping Jump reach its 3 million circulation number. It spanned 25 volumes having 122 chapters, a sequel series in Super Jump, and anime adaptations throughout the 2000s, a few decades after its original serialization. It's also partially translated into English, so you can read a few volumes, and I think if you're Brazilian you might be able to read the entire series, as Ring ni Kakero is very popular over there. The story sees two siblings, Kiku and Ryuji, whose father is a famous boxer. They now live with their mother and abusive stepfather, a plot point which I wasn't really expecting, and starts the series off on a very serious note. Kiku is pretty much the main character at the beginning too, taking a lot of initiative and propelling the plot forward. She's a strong female protagonist who cares about her whiny brother and who will be instrumental in his development. Their stepdad, being super cruel, beats them and sells anything he can, making the two's life a living hell. Ultimately, he wants to sell their father's old boxing gloves for money. Kiku ends up pelting her stepfather and the siblings run away. Kiku determined that her brother will become an amazing boxer just like her father in the future. They struggle to find a place to live in Tokyo, and there's a lot of really good character development, with Ryuji never really asking for any of this and snapping at his sister, who's been dragging him along wherever they go, while Kiku, seemingly tired of life, just wants the two of them to experience interesting things and live together. The relationship between them is really well done, funny and heartfelt, with Ryuji growing immensely and learning to box. The manga ending for me during the first big tournament of the series when the translation stopped. And I wish I could have read more because it really felt like it was just the beginning and it was just becoming the shonen boxing series it is well known as. I love the build-up of the two characters, and you really get to see Ryuji grow up as a person and a fighter. The art too is amazing. I love the way faces and characters are drawn. It's a bit muddy sometimes, but there's some great composition and it's easy to read overall. Masumi Kurumada's art in general is great. It has a much softer, prettier feel to it, which may have been popular with female readers, something he seemed to lean into in Saint Seiya, where the main cast are essentially a group of pretty boys. Ringly Kakero would go on to take inspiration from manga like Astro Kyudan in earlier Jump history, and push for a fusion of sports and battle, establishing a battle manga that would veer into the absurd, but would also stay grounded within its sport. It presented itself in a more over-the-top way, and a large portion of shonen sports manga can trace back their roots to this title as a point of inspiration, with it directly inspiring works like Captain Tsubasa and Prince of Tennis, supposedly. Its tournament arcs, rivals, crazy name techniques, and its never give up attitude were also likely massive influences on shonen manga as a whole. Not something it solely pioneered, but people definitely took inspiration from this as it was very popular at the time, with I think even Akira Toriyama and Yoshihiro Togashi of Dragon Ball and Yu Yu Hakusho citing it as an inspiration. Outside of manga, it might have influenced games like Street Fighter and King of Fighters 2. Potentially, it's responsible for a lot of fighting game tropes, in part at least. And then a favourite of mine, Mobile Fighter G Gundam, has taken clear influence from Ringly Kakero with its martial arts focus, over-the-top shonen energy, and its penchant for making stereotypical national teams, just like in Ringly Kakero. Moving on, we would see Yame no Toboi, the Dark Runaway Doctor, written by Kiyoshi Yakayama and drawn by Tadashi Kato. It had 2 volumes and either ended or got cancelled. As for the content, it's possibly about a dark doctor who gets framed by the Yakuza or another criminal organization. On the run, he likely discovers the truth and is hunted by the police. It's interesting to see a potential crime drama in Jump, especially since it seems to be aimed at older audiences, judging by the intrigue and gore it has. I found it online officially, I think, for free. The caveat being it's only in Japanese. Although, if someone wants a smaller manga translation project, it's only 17 chapters long. Asataro Den is next, which ran for 11 volumes, meaning it reached some level of success. Made by Norihiro Nakajima, responsible in part for Astro Kyudan, Asataro Den is a Bansho delinquent manga that follows a boy named Asotaro Tanto as he fights his way through Koichi Prefecture. It seems he might grow up throughout the story from first grade to a young man. Works that followed this formula weren't uncommon in Jump, with Hiroshi Motomiya doing the same with Otoko Ippiki Gaki Daisho, as well as some of his other manga in the magazine. It's nice to see that delinquent manga remain a mainstay in Jump almost 10 years after its conception. Let me tell you some background information about me and this project as we tackle our next manga. Originally, I did a lot of research for the 60s and 70s of Jump a couple years ago, mostly as a personal hobby thing. I find it fun to just read up and try to figure out what Jump was like in these older years. And to begin with, I wanted to look at Jump year by year, but in completely random years. And 1977 was the first random year I ever drew, before I would go on to just research things chronologically anyway. And the very first manga I ever looked at as part of this project was a manga called Yachin, a 15 chapter long gag manga by Yasumi Yoshizawa, the author of Gutsy Frog and Ramame Holmes, which we covered in this video. From what I can tell, like Holmes, Yachin never got a volume release, so images of it are quite rare, but I managed to find a few, and the best I can tell is Yachin is a boy who likely got up to mischievous antics with his older sister, who might have been a model, and there was also a crab.
Qualified to explain his research methods.
Like his other work, Yoshizawa would never get a hit as big as the Gutsy Frog, so Yachin would fall into obscurity, although I have a little bit of fondness for Yachin due to my personal history with it. Jump would get a few smaller works such as Jump Minwa Gekijo, Jump Folktale Theatre, perhaps a short story anthology focusing on Japanese folktales, before getting its next bigger hit, that being Hole in One by Tatsuo Kanai and Kagami Joji. It ran for 127 chapters and had 13 total volumes, ending just before the 1980s began. Hole in One is a sports drama revolving around golf, following Yaichi Tobashi, who has a natural aptitude for the sport, entering clubs and participating in tournaments, all in order to become a professional golfer. Perhaps due to his mother's illness, as in a synopsis it mentions she has fallen unconscious. Surrounding Yaichi on many covers are a lot of older looking female characters, so perhaps the manga had some fan service elements too, although it sounds as if it was just a very standard and serious golfing story. During this period, Jump would have a lot of sports series, as we can see in issue 27 cover of 1977, 2 baseball series, 1 golf series, and boxing 2. If you want to count circuit racing, then there's 5. There was a lot of variety at this time, and very different to the battle shonen magazine most people think Jump is. Susume Pirates was a baseball gag manga that ran for 11 volumes and 152 chapters by Hisashi Eguchi. It mostly focused on baseball aspects and matches, and it was named after the Chiba Pirates baseball team, but it would also venture into absurdist humor, parody, and tackle current events now and again. Compared to One Two no Aho, another baseball comedy manga which we covered in the last video, Susume Pirates actually focused more on the games, but showed them in a more funny way rather than being completely serious affairs. While One Two no Aho was primarily a gag manga with baseball theming, so both of them kind of had their own niche, and for a while they would both coexist in the magazine despite being so similar. We would go on to follow Susume Pirates with Kyojin Taichi no Densetsu, or Legend of the Giants in English, a short sci-fi story collection that's been fully translated into English, so you can read it. Hoshino Yukinobu, the author of Blue City, would return, meaning we begin and end this video with him. Just 1 volume long, it contains 4 stories. The Legend of Giants, split into a chapter on the history of a race of giants and their input in our solar system, and the second part, where we follow a group of scientists trying to lessen the ice age that has ravaged the Earth by blowing up Jupiter, which is a pretty enjoyable read. The third story, Icarus Asteroid, is about sending a ship into orbit to help amplify the amount of sun the Earth receives to stop the ice age it's suffering from, but there's pesky terrorists getting in the way. And then there's the fourth story, which is about this massive network of transport roads where these 2 bros go around driving super fast cars and have to solve problems related to roads and traffic accidents. They mostly blow stuff up, to be honest, which is a lot of fun.
Hi, Herbert.
There's also this part near the end of the chapter where the 2 do a maneuver they call the homo jump, where one car borrows the other car's ass, which I think is so dumb and I can't help but laugh, and it's just kind of like gay bro culture years before it became a kind of funny thing in modern day, but it's just in this random shonen manga one shot from the 70s. Me and the boys are gonna be doing homo jumps for days after reading this. Overall, it's a really nice one-shot collection with some stellar art which I've been popping up on screen for your visual enjoyment throughout this section. We would then end the year on a car 2, appropriate as Circuit no Okami really exploded this year, with many of Jump's covers being filled with all sorts of race cars from the supercar boom that was happening at the time. Jump had yet again left itself in a good place, with plenty of strong series holding down the fort and newbies that would last for years to come. One of them which would be superglued to Jump for the majority of its circulation, that being Kochikame. And Ring ni Kakero would help pioneer shonen sport and battle manga, laying down the foundation for the future of Jump. Next time we'll see the end of the decade as we look at 1978 and 1979, where we'll be joined by some other absolute classics from the magazine's history, which from here on out will be much more common. For now though, if you've watched this far, thank you so much for watching. Please check out my other videos on manga and Shonen Jump, and subscribe if you want more content like this. As always, be kind to each other and take care.